Hi, Sean here, one half of Sean and Kiara. We are the co-creators of Lucy in the Sky, a graphic novel for middle grade readers published by First Second. Our second graphic novel, Rhiannon, will be out in October of 2025. If you like the things we do, please consider supporting us by becoming a paying member of our Patreon site for $4 a month. And if you enjoy videos like this, hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it'll help us build this channel. Thank you, and enjoy the video. Hi, welcome back. This is Sean, and today I'd like to take a look at a short story in that I read originally in an issue of Heavy Metal magazine back when I was very young. Well, when I was a teenager, very young compared to how old I am now. So this is from August of 1982, the August 1982 issue of Heavy Metal magazine. And as I said, I bought this magazine as a teenager, this particular issue. What we're seeing now is not it, it's a scan of that issue. If I remember it correctly, it was my friend who introduced me to it, and he had a copy from his dad, and I remember he and I looked at it and he enjoyed it, but for me it was sort of like it was an epiphany. Up to that point, the only European comics that I'd been exposed to was probably Tintin, and I remember reading Asterix. I remember being introduced to that in my French class in high school. But now there was sort of like there was a whole new world had opened up for me. And it was just incredible. I still remember the stories that were in that first issue that we had. And in fact, that issue happened to be, it had a cover that tied into the Heavy Metal movie that was just out around that time as well. And it was kind of like, this is, it's one of those things in life you discover and you get the feeling like you'd been looking for this for a long time, or, all your life. And so all of a sudden, now there were artists like Möbius and Anki Bilal, and pretty soon I would discover other comics artists that I still to this day admire and count among some of my favorites, like Joost Zwarta and Yves Chaland. And I remember discovering American artists for the first time through the magazine. Charles Burns, I think I discovered him first through Heavy Metal, and definitely Elaine Lee and Mike Kalu's Starstruck when it ran in Heavy Metal. And until Raw came out, Art Spiegelman's anthologies began coming out. I mean, this was sort of like the source for me for an alternative to typical American comics fare, which up until like the 80s was more or less, you had your superhero comics, and then you had the sort of the Funny Animal and Archie comics and that type of stuff. But there really wasn't a whole lot of variety, and definitely nothing for a more adult or literary audience. Not, that stuff started coming out in the 80s with Fantagraphics, Hernandez Brothers and Dan Clowes and people like that. And it was probably around that time that when I discovered those artists that I stopped reading Heavy Metal magazine, and this is all the sort of the pre-Kevin Eastman Heavy Metal, and I think at that point it kind of took a turn that I really wasn't much interested in it anymore. It seemed to devote itself more to sci-fi porn than anything else. And so by the late 80s, I wasn't buying it anymore. But at this point, this was sort of like the high point for me in 1982. The story that we're going to look at here is by two French artists, Jean-Louis Floch and Jean-Luc Fromental, and it's only 8 pages. And let's go to it now. So here it is. It's called Right Smack in the Middle of a Cold War. And I remember reading this and thinking immediately Tintin. This obviously has such an Hergé look to it. Well, it's slightly different. And I hadn't discovered Joost Sforte yet. And I would say now that this has a lot of similarity, more similarity to his comics than to Hergé. But at the time, Hergé was the only point of reference for me here in this the ligne claire, the clean line style, which Joost Sforte coined the phrase, the clear line, the ligne claire. But it was meant to describe the style that Hergé pioneered. And so the story here involves these two main characters. The first panel, we see one of them approaching a house that has a very modernist, kind of googie look to it, that style of architecture. And we see the style throughout. And it's another thing that brings to mind Joost Sforte, his modernist style that he incorporates in his comics. So the character here in the trench coat, his name is Fedor, and we find out that he's kind of like an agent of some intelligence agency. We find out that it's actually called the EFF, or the Espionage for Fun. But as we start the story, we don't know exactly who he is or what he is. And we see the house is in Antibes, which is a place on the French Riviera. And this next panel, second panel, so there's a lot going on there. Lots of this modernist style of furniture and architecture again. And then here we have several references to Hergé. So we've got his signature actually in these picture panels in the background here, backwards. And then we've got the mummy, Raskar Kapak, from Prisoners of the Sun, making a guest appearance there. And even this yellow seaplane reminds me of the one from The Crab with the Golden Claws. And I wouldn't have noticed this at the time, the first time around that I read this in '82, but now I recognize this right here is a model of the swordfish, which is the aircraft from the Blake and Mortimer comics that Edgar P. Jacobs did, and he was one of Hergé's collaborators. His first main collaborator. And here introduced the second of the characters. His name is Miloš. And so both of them have sort of a Eastern European sounding names, and Fedor even greets Miloš in something that looks like it might be Russian or something, I don't know. But and so he comes in, and he mentions to Miloš that cartoon critiquing is pretty lucrative business. So we learn that Miloš is a cartoon critic, and he's come looking to enlist Miloš in some endeavor. And so we find out a little bit more about these characters. Miloš does not want to go along with whatever Fedor's plan is to recruit him to do, but Fedor reminds him that Well, he says here, your debt, but you don't owe us anything, Milos. You belong to us. And then we go back to, we have a flashback here, a nice use of the limited palette color. And we see Milos in Red Square in what is apparently Lenin's tomb. We see a little glimpse of Lenin in the background, or Lenin's corpse, which was apparently embalmed, and he's being caught by the police selling American comics. And Milos languishes in jail until he is rescued by Fedor and the EFF. And so we see Milos has been brought down and humbled, being reminded the debt that he owes this organization. And we don't really find out what it is that Fedor wants to recruit him for. And then this other character, Michael, is a young boy, approaches with his little portfolio under his arm. And he, I like that this little seaplane is just flying constantly about the scene, and it flies out the door there. He tells Milos that he's about ready to go to America tomorrow, and does he have a moment to look at some of his drawings? So he brings him up to the winter garden, he says, which seems to be like a rooftop garden, and he's greeted by Fedor pointing a gun at him. Before we see that, we see that Fedor has in his suitcase some sort of science fiction looking contraption here. And then again, this garden that they're in, and this which looks like a pool with lily pads with steps going down to it, and I wonder if this is what Michael has just walked out of, and if the water is some sort of hologram or something, I don't know. Another little detail here is the moon rocket from Tintin's The Two Adventures, Destination Moon and Explorers on the Moon. So Fedor brings Michael over and puts one of these helmets on him to Milos's protesting, puts the other helmet on himself, and we find out that it's some sort of mind-switching technology. He's going to swap minds with Michael and then go on his trip to America in his place. We find out that he's just won the first prize in the Disney contest. And so the mind swapping seems to work, and now we have Fedor is in the body of the kid Michael. And we see as Michael goes off to America on the plane here. He's of course it's Fedor, not Michael, and he's drooling over his traveling neighbor's cleavage, it looks like. And they get off the plane. Kind of a cool sort of futuristic looking car there. Pulls up in front of Disneyland, the Sleeping Beauty castle in the background, and he's taken down into the underground complex, which which we know exists below Disneyland. But here we come down into well, it looks like we have a miniature golf course, and then sort of like a little theater, a viewing theater back behind here, and here's Disney. Well, hello there, big fella. I'm Walt Disney. He's teeing up, and he's got these little dwarf-like helpers about him who kind of remind me of Oompa Loompas in a way, but they also have a somewhat racist kind of way that they're drawn. Although they're white-skinned, they're light-skinned, they've got like this sort of, or the racist stereotype way that that black folks were drawn once upon a time. Kind of looks like that. And they They're all in uniform according to whatever it is that they're doing. Here's some of them bringing out, looks like a dinner, a banquet. The ones up here dressed as golf caddies. And down here, looks like they've got like moving coveralls on or something. And so Michael slash Fedor brings out his helmet. He says, let's play a little game. And Disney gets up, and we're not playing any game, Fedor Fedorovich. What? But how do you know my name? And Disney, we see that as he's talking, he starts emitting these little bips. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's a little panel here showing the house up above, some light coming on. Something's going on up there. Could it be that they're using the mind switching machine again? And sure enough, we get another panel of whoever is now inside Fedor's body is leaving. And back to Disney. So we're in the little screening room that he has. And again, the little, these midget, like, these dwarf-like characters, helpers, Oompa Loompas around him, or there's one dressed up as a theater, what do you call these people that come, concession seller, I guess. And he shows Michael slash Fedor a film. He says this film was taken in Cuba in 1959, the day of Batista's fall. And we see what looks like Disney with in a compromising position with a lady, and here the rebels storming through, I guess, probably Havana. And then we see her leaving Disney with looks like a machete in his chest. And so our Disney robot takes off his head, and he said, you see, I'm a Honeywell 4400 robot conceived by Langley. We're on to your whole espionage game. Face it, Fedor Fedorovich, you've lost. So he sends him on his way packing. So Fedor, still in the body of Michael, comes back thinking that he's greeting Milos, but it turns out that it's not Milos, it's now Michael. So Milos and Michael have switched minds, and Milos has now walked off with Fedor's body. And at the end here, we get another ring of the doorbell like at the beginning, and just like at the beginning, Fedor's body. But who's inside Fedor's body this time? And we see that he's got Disney's clothing on. He comes in and he says, well, Bip, hello there, big fella. I'm Walt Disney. It's kind of a confusing ending. It's sort of hard to keep track of who is in whose body. Even the upside down fin at the end here. So anyway, this was one of those stories where I continue to just look at these panels again and again, and I see now that it's been a while since I've seen this, I've looked at this, and I see so many things here that I've lifted from my own comics, some of this futurist or modernist architecture, and the artwork that's outside of the house. So, there we go. Hope you enjoyed that. Come on back for whatever I take a look at next time.